Lisa Carter stared at her screen with tired eyes. She had been working the night shift at Luna Gateway Station for 3 months now. Most nights were quiet. Ships came and went. Messages flew between Earth and Mars. Nothing exciting ever happened in deep space communications. But tonight was different. The signal came from somewhere far beyond the solar system. It was weak and broken like a whisper in a storm. Lisa turned up the volume and listened carefully. The pattern was strange. It repeated every few minutes with the same numbers and sounds. She called her supervisor. "Hey Jake, you need to hear this." Captain Jake Morrison walked over to Lisa's station. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the Mars Wars. He had seen plenty of action in his 40 years of service. Nothing surprised him anymore. "What do you have, Carter?" Jake asked. Lisa played the recording. The signal was full of static, but underneath they could hear something that made their skin crawl. It was definitely not human. The sounds were too musical, too flowing. But mixed in with the alien noises were numbers, mathematical sequences that any intelligent species would understand. "That's a distress beacon," Jake said quietly. "I've heard enough of them to know, but from where?" Lisa checked her instruments. "The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 system. That's over 1,200 light-years away, Captain." Jake rubbed his beard. 1,200 light-years was incredibly far. No human ship had ever traveled that distance. Hell, they had only just started exploring systems within 50 light-years of Earth. "Get Dr. Brooks down here," Jake ordered. "If anyone can figure out what this thing is saying, it's her." Dr. Helen Brooks arrived 20 minutes later, still, wearing her pajamas under her lab coat. She was the station's expert on alien languages, though until now she had only worked with theoretical models. No one had ever found real aliens to talk to. Helen listened to the recording 3 times without saying a word. Her face grew more serious with each replay. "This is incredible," she finally said. "The mathematical parts are clearly distress signals, universal concepts that any spacefaring species would recognize. But there's more." She pointed to her tablet where she had been taking notes. "Listen to this part here. The sounds change. They're trying to copy something." Helen enhanced a section of the recording. Through the static and alien noises, they could hear something that made all 3 humans freeze. "Help us." The words were broken and strange, spoken by something that had never used a human throat. But they were definitely English words. "They learned our language," Helen whispered. "Somehow they picked up our radio signals and learned to speak English." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Play it again." This time they could hear more. The alien voice struggled with each word, but the message was clear. "Help us. They come. We die. Help us." Lisa's hands shook as she enhanced the signal further. "Captain, there's more data here. Star charts, biological information, even what looks like pictures." The images were fuzzy, but they showed a blue-green world covered in vast oceans. Strange coral-like structures rose from the water, forming cities that looked more grown than built. And swimming between them were creatures that looked almost like dolphins, but with long arms and huge intelligent eyes. "These must be the people sending the message," Helen said. "They live in the water." But the next images were horrifying. The same beautiful world, but dead. The oceans were gone. The coral cities were crushed in gray, and in space around the planet, massive dark shapes moved like hungry shadows. "Something is destroying their worlds," Jake said grimly. "And they're asking us for help." Over the next few hours, more messages came through. Each one was weaker than the last, as if the aliens were running out of power or time. Helen worked frantically to understand more of their language. What she discovered was even worse than they had feared. The aliens called themselves the Zilani. They were peaceful creatures who had never known war. For thousands of years they had lived in harmony with their ocean worlds, building cities that grew like living things and developing technology that worked with nature instead of against. Then the Devourers came. The Zilani didn't understand what the Devourers were, only that they consumed everything. Planets, moons, even the water and air. They moved through space in ships that seemed to be alive, growing larger with each world they destroyed. The Zilani had tried to fight back, but their peaceful nature worked against them. Their biotechnology was meant to create and heal, not destroy. Their weapons were weak against an enemy that consumed everything it touched. World after world fell to the devourers. Billions of Zilani died as their homes were stripped bare and turned into fuel for the enemy's growth. The Zilani had been listening to Earth's radio signals for decades. They knew humans were different, violent, warlike. They had heard about Earth's history of conflict and destruction. To the peaceful Zilani, these qualities had seemed terrible. But now, facing extinction, they realized that sometimes terrible qualities were exactly what was needed. The final message came through just as Admiral Patricia Stone arrived from Earth Command. The transmission was so weak they almost missed it. "Please," the alien voice whispered. "Warriors from the violent world, help us. We cannot fight them. You can. Please come." Then silence. Admiral Stone studied the data with cold eyes. She was a small woman, but everyone on the station knew her reputation. She had commanded fleets in 3 different wars and never lost a battle. "How far away is this system?" she asked. 1,200 light-years, Jake replied. "It would take our fastest ships 18 months to get there. And when they arrive, they'll be completely cut off from Earth. No support, no reinforcements, no way home if things go wrong." Jake nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's a suicide mission." Admiral Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and everyone in the room felt a shiver of anticipation. "Captain Morrison," she said formally, "how would you like to command Earth's first interstellar rescue mission?" Jake grinned back. "When do we leave?" The UES Valiant was the most advanced ship humanity had ever built. It stretched nearly 1 kilometer long and carried the best weapons, shields, and engines that Earth technology could create. But as it flew through the darkness between stars, it felt very small and alone. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the ship's corridors checking on his crew. 18 months was a long time to spend in space, especially when they had no idea what they would find at the end of their journey. In the training bay, Colonel Sam Parker was running his Marines through combat drills. Sam was a tough soldier who had fought in every major conflict of the past 20 years. His men trusted him completely, which was good because they would need that trust in the battles ahead. "Remember," Sam called out to his troops, "we don't know what these devourers look like or how they fight. Stay flexible, watch each other's backs, and never ever assume the enemy is dead until you've checked twice." The Marines nodded and continued their exercises. They practiced fighting in zero gravity in tight spaces and against enemies that might be completely different from anything they had faced before. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez worked on modifying their weapon systems. Amy was young but brilliant. She could make machines do things their designers never imagined. "The problem," Amy explained to her team, "is that we don't know what kind of defenses these bioships have. Our plasma cannons might work great, or they might be completely useless." She had been studying the data from the Zilani transmissions, trying to understand how their biotechnology worked. It was like nothing humans had ever seen. Instead of building machines from metal and circuits, the Zilani grew their technology like plants or coral. "If their ships are alive," Amy said, "then maybe we need to think of them as giant animals instead of machines. What kills an animal might not kill a machine, and what kills a machine might not kill an animal." In her laboratory, Dr. Helen Brooks spent every waking hour learning the Zilani language. The more she understood, the more worried she became. The Zilani had sent thousands of messages over the past few years, and Helen was slowly translating them all. They told a story of horror that made her stomach turn. The devourers didn't just kill the Zilani, they consumed them. Every plant, every animal, every single living thing on a planet was broken down and absorbed. Even the Zilani themselves were processed into raw biological material to fuel the growth of more bioships. But worse than that, the devourers seemed to learn from what they consumed. Each world they destroyed made them stronger and smarter. They absorbed not just the bodies of their victims, but their knowledge and memories too. They're not just conquering worlds. Helen told Jake during one of their daily meetings. They're stealing everything that made those worlds special. The Zilani had thousands of years of art, music, science, and culture. Now it's all gone, absorbed, into those horrible ships. Jake listened quietly. He had seen plenty of destruction in his military career, but this was different. This was genocide on a scale that was hard to imagine. As the months passed, the crew of the Valiant prepared for war in ways both big and small. The scientists studied every piece of data they had about the Devourers. The engineers built new weapons and modified old ones. The soldiers trained until they could fight in their sleep. But perhaps most importantly, Dr. Brooks worked to understand their allies. The Zilani were unlike any life form humans had imagined. They lived both in water and on land, breathing through gills and lungs. Their skin could change color to communicate emotions and ideas, creating patterns of light that were as complex as any human language. They had never known war because they had never needed it. Their worlds were rich and peaceful, with plenty of resources for everyone. They solved conflicts through discussion and compromise, not violence. Their technology reflected this peaceful nature. Instead of building weapons, they grew living tools that could heal injuries and repair damage. Their ships were not made of metal, but of modified coral that could survive in space while providing a comfortable home for its crew. No wonder they couldn't fight the Devourers, Helen said sadly. It would be like asking a flower to become a sword. The months of travel gave the crew time to think about what they were doing. They were flying across the galaxy to fight an enemy they didn't understand, to save people they had never met, with no guarantee that they could ever return home. Some of the younger crew members asked Jake why they were taking such a risk. Why should humans die for aliens on the other side of the galaxy? Jake's answer was always the same. Because they asked for help, and we're the only ones who can give it. Finally, after 18 long months, the ship's sensors detected the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Jake ordered all hands to battle stations as they prepared to drop out of faster-than-light travel. What they saw when they arrived made even the toughest Marines gasp in horror. 3 of the 7 Zilani worlds were completely dark. Where once there had been blue oceans and green continents, now there was only gray rock. The planets looked like skulls, stripped of everything that had once made them beautiful. Between the dead worlds moved shapes that hurt to look at. Bioships, the size of moons, drifted through space like bloated corpses. Their hulls pulsed with sickly light, and even from a distance the humans could tell they were very much alive. "Dear God," whispered Amy from the engineering station. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" But before Jake could answer, something appeared on their sensors. A small ship was approaching from one of the surviving worlds. It moved gracefully through space, its hull shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. "Captain," Lisa said from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission." The voice that came through the speakers was musical and sad, but the English words were clear. "Ships from Earth, you came, we did not dare to hope, but you came." Jake stepped forward. This was it. First contact with an alien species, and possibly humanity's first step into a war that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Valiant," he said formally. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." There was a pause, and then the alien voice replied with something that sounded almost like tears. "Thank you, warriors from the violent world. Thank you for answering our call." The Zilani ship was beautiful in a way that made the humans stare in wonder. It looked like it had grown instead of being built, with smooth curves and surfaces that rippled with soft light. As it came closer to the Valiant, they could see that parts of it were actually transparent, showing the water-filled chambers inside. Jake felt nervous as he prepared to meet the aliens face to face. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries, but he had never imagined it would happen like this, in the middle of a war zone. The docking bay was filled with water when the Zilani ship connected to the Valiant. Jake and his team wore special suits that would let them breathe underwater. Dr. Brooks carried a translation device she had built during the journey. The airlock opened, and the first alien that humans had ever seen swam into their ship. The Zilani was about the size of a human, but moved through the water with incredible grace. Its skin was pale blue-green and seemed to glow with its own light. Large, dark eyes studied the humans with obvious intelligence, and long, delicate arms ended in hands that had too many fingers. "I am called Reef Singer of Deep Currents," the alien said through Dr. Brooks's translator. "I speak for those who still live." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. These are my officers. We came as soon as we could." Reef Singer's skin changed color, showing patterns of light that Dr. Brooks realized was another form of communication. The alien was expressing gratitude, but also deep sadness. "3 of our worlds are gone," Reef Singer said. "Billions of my people are dead. The Devourers consume everything they touch. Soon they will finish with our remaining worlds and move on to devour others." "Tell us about the enemy," Jake said. "How do they fight? What are their weaknesses?" Reef Singer's patterns shifted to show fear and confusion. "They are not like any life we have known. Their ships are alive but wrong. They grow and change but only to consume more. They have no art, no music, no joy, they only hunger." Over the next few hours, Reef Singer shared everything the Zilani had learned about their enemy. The Devourers operated as a hive mind, with all their bioships connected through some kind of living network. They could adapt to new threats very quickly, changing their tactics and even their physical forms to counter whatever the Zilani tried to do. "We tried to fight them with our bioships," Reef Singer explained, "but they absorbed our technology and made it part of themselves. Now they use our own creations against us." Dr. Brooks asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How many of them are there?" Reef Singer's skin went completely dark. "We do not know. They came from beyond our furthest sensors. But we have seen hundreds of their bioships, and each one is the size of a small moon. They grow larger with every world they consume." Jake felt a chill. Hundreds of moon-sized bioships meant an enemy force that could destroy entire solar systems. The Valiant and its crew were just one ship against an army of monsters. "We need to see one of your surviving worlds," Jake said. "We need to understand your technology and your defenses." Reef Singer led them to Sanctuary, the outermost world that the Zilani still controlled. As they approached the planet, Jake saw why the Zilani had been able to hold it so far. The world was mostly ocean, with small islands scattered across its surface. But beneath the water, incredible cities stretched down into the deep. The Zilani cities were like nothing humans had ever imagined. They looked like vast coral reefs, but they were clearly artificial. Towers spiraled up from the ocean floor, connected by bridges that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Schools of fish swam between the buildings, but Jake realized they weren't really fish at all. They were living machines, part of the city's immune system. "Your cities are alive," Dr. Brooks said in amazement. "Of course," Reef Singer replied. "Why would we build dead things when we can grow living ones? Our cities heal themselves when damaged. They adapt to threats. They even think, in their own way." Colonel Sam Parker studied the defenses with a soldier's eye. The Zilani had bioships that could fight, but they were designed more for protection than attack. Their weapons were meant to disable rather than destroy, to drive away threats rather than kill them. "No wonder you couldn't stop the Devourers," Sam said bluntly. "You're fighting a total war with police equipment." But Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez was more interested in how the Zilani technology worked. She watched in fascination as the living cities grew new structures before her eyes, adapting to the presence of the human ship. "This is incredible," Amy said. "Your technology doesn't just work, it evolves. It learns and improves itself." "Yes," Reef Singer agreed. "But it takes time to grow and change. The Devourers attack too quickly for our cities to adapt. They overwhelm our defenses before we can develop new ones." Jake began to understand the problem. The Zilani had amazing technology, but it was designed for a peaceful species that had never faced an enemy like the Devourers. Their bioships were beautiful and efficient, but they couldn't match the raw destructive power of an enemy that existed only to consume and destroy. "Show us your most important place," Jake said. "The thing the Devourers want most." Reef Singer's patterns showed deep concern. You ask to see the heart of tides. It is our most sacred place, and our most dangerous secret. Deep beneath sanctuaries, ocean, far below even the deepest cities, lay something that took Jake's breath away. The heart of tides was a massive living computer, bigger than any human building. It pulsed with soft light and was connected to every part of the planet by organic cables that looked like giant nerve fibers. This is where we store the memory of our people, Reef Singer explained. Every song, every story, every piece of knowledge we have gained in 10,000 years. It is the soul of our civilization. Dr. Brooks stared at the biocomputer in awe. It's like a living library. Every Zilani who ever lived, their thoughts and experiences are stored here. If the Devourers capture the heart of tides, Reef Singer said quietly, they will absorb not just our bodies but our souls. They will know everything we know, and they will use that knowledge to consume other worlds more efficiently. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They weren't just fighting to save the Zilani, they were fighting to prevent the Devourers from gaining thousands of years of advanced biological knowledge. How long do we have? He asked. Reef Singer's skin flashed with urgent colors. Our scouts report the main Devourer fleet is moving toward Sanctuary. They will arrive in 10 of your days. 10 days to prepare for a battle against an enemy that had already consumed 3 worlds. 10 days to figure out how to fight bioships the size of moons with technology that could adapt to any threat. As Jake looked at the heart of tides, pulsing, with the memories of an entire civilization, he made a decision that would change everything. We're not going to run, he said firmly. We're going to fight, and we're going to win. But even as he said the words, Jake wondered if human determination would be enough against an enemy that had already proven it could consume entire worlds. The countdown to the battle for Sanctuary had begun. The Devourer fleet arrived like a nightmare made real. Through the Valiant's viewports, Jake and his crew watched hundreds of bioships emerge from the darkness of space. Each one was massive, some bigger than Earth's moon, and they moved with a terrible purpose that made the humans' skin crawl. The bioships didn't look like any spacecraft humans had ever imagined. They were organic, with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts and surfaces covered in what looked like scales or chitin. Smaller organisms swarmed around them like parasites, and the whole fleet moved together as if controlled by a single mind. My God, whispered Amy from the engineering station. They're all connected. Look at the energy readings. She was right. The bioships were communicating through some kind of living network, sending pulses of bioelectric energy between themselves. They moved with perfect coordination like fingers on a hand. Colonel Sam Parker watched the enemy fleet with a soldier's eye. They're not attacking randomly. This is organized. They're surrounding the planet, cutting off escape routes. The first Devourer bioship to reach Sanctuary's surface was the size of a small city. It descended through the atmosphere like a falling mountain, ignoring the defensive fire from the Zilani bioships. When it touched down on one of the larger islands, the ground cracked under its weight. Jake made a quick decision. Colonel, take your Marines down there. We need to see what we're fighting up close. Sam nodded grimly. Roger that, Captain. Come on, boys. Let's go meet the neighbors. The Marine dropships launched from the Valiant and flew toward the landed bioship. As they got closer, Sam could see that the thing was already changing. Parts of its hull were opening like enormous flowers, releasing swarms of smaller organisms. What the hell are those things? Asked Sergeant Bill Murphy, Sam's second in command. Sam studied the creatures through his binoculars. They moved on, multiple legs and had mouths full of teeth, but the worst part was their eyes. They looked almost intelligent, as if they were thinking and planning. Looks like we're about to find out, Sam replied, as the dropships touched down. The Marines moved, carefully toward the bioship, their weapons ready. The first Devourer organisms they encountered were about the size of large dogs, but they moved faster than anything that size should have been able to move. The creatures attacked without warning, leaping from hiding places with horrible shrieks. But they had never fought humans before, and humans had spent thousands of years learning how to kill things that wanted to kill them. Sam's Marines opened fire with their assault rifles, and the sound of gunfire echoed across the island. The Devourer organisms were tough, but they couldn't adapt fast enough to stop bullets traveling at 3,000 feet per second. "They're learning," Sam called out over the radio. "The ones in the back are moving differently than the ones in front. They're adapting to our tactics in real time." But humans were good at adapting too. When the Devourers started moving in new patterns, the Marines changed their own tactics. They used grenades when the creatures bunched together, and switched to single shots when they spread out. Inside the bioship, things got even stranger. The corridors were like being inside a giant animal. The walls pulsed with veins carrying some kind of organic fluid, and the air was thick with a smell that made the Marines want to vomit. "This whole ship is alive," reported Corporal Janet Lee over her radio. "The floor feels like it's breathing under my feet." The Marines pushed deeper into the bioship, fighting off waves of devourer organisms. But the strangest thing was that the creatures seemed to know things they shouldn't know. They anticipated the Marines' movements and tried to use tactics that looked almost human. It was Sergeant Murphy who figured out why. "Colonel, look at this." He was standing over the body of a devourer organism, but parts of it looked wrong. Mixed in with the alien flesh were pieces that looked almost familiar. "Is that Zilani tissue?" Sam asked, studying the creature more closely. "I think so, sir. These things aren't just eating the Zilani. They're absorbing them, taking their knowledge and making it part of themselves." Sam felt sick. The Devourers weren't just killing their enemies. They were stealing everything that made them who they were. Back in space, Jake was having his own problems. The Devourer bioships in orbit were starting to attack the Valiant and the Zilani defenders. But their weapons were unlike anything humans had seen before. Instead of energy beams or missiles, the bioships fired living projectiles, organisms that could survive in space and change direction during flight. The Valiant's point defense systems had trouble tracking targets that could think for themselves. "Captain, we're taking damage on decks 7 and 8, Amy reported. "One of those things got through our shields and is trying to eat its way through the hull." "Handle it," Jake ordered, then turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Davis, return fire, all guns." The Valiant's plasma cannons fired back at the bioships, but the results were disappointing. The enemy hulls absorbed most of the energy, and what damage they did take seemed to heal within minutes. "Our weapons aren't working," Davis reported. "They're adapting to our energy signatures." But Amy had an idea. "Captain, what if we stop trying to fight them like machines and start fighting them like animals?" She switched the ship's weapons to kinetic rounds, simple chunks of metal fired at incredible speed. When the tungsten slugs hit the bioships, they punched right through their adaptive hulls. "That's it," Amy shouted. "They can adapt to energy weapons, but they can't adapt to physics. A chunk of metal moving at 20,000 miles per hour is still going to hurt, no matter what they do." The tide of the space battle began to turn. The Valiant's kinetic weapons were doing real damage to the bioships, and the Zilani defenders began copying the human tactics. But the victory came at a terrible cost. 3 Zilani bioships were destroyed, their crews consumed by the Devourers. And worse, the enemy was learning from every battle. "Captain," Dr. Brooks called from her station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the main bioship. They're preparing something big." Through the viewport, Jake could see the largest bioship beginning to glow. Parts of its hull were opening, revealing structures that looked like enormous organic cannons. "All ships, evasive action," Jake ordered. But he knew it was too late. The bioship fired, and a beam of pure destructive energy lanced across space toward Sanctuary's largest city. When it hit, billions of tons of living coral simply ceased to exist, leaving a wound in the ocean that would never heal. Reef Singer's voice came over the radio, filled with grief. "The city of first songs is gone. 10 million of my people lived there." Jake clenched his fists. The Devourers weren't just trying to win a battle. They were trying to erase an entire civilization from existence. "Colonel Parker, fall back to the Valiant," Jake ordered. "We need a new plan." As the Marines retreated from the bioship, fighting off pursuing devourer organisms, Sam realized something important. The creatures were tough and they could adapt, but they were still just animals following instincts. They could learn, but they couldn't innovate. Humans, on the other hand, were very good at coming up with new ways to kill things that wanted to kill them. "Captain," Sam said as his dropship headed back to the Valiant, "I think I know how to beat these things. But we're going to need every weapon we have, and probably some we haven't invented yet." Jake looked at the burning cities below and the bioships swarming through space around them. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting, an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. But they were human, and humans had never learned how to quit. Jake Morrison stood in the Valiant's medical bay, staring at his broken body in the mirror. The explosion that had torn through the bridge had left him with burns on half his face and a broken arm. But he was alive, which was more than could be said for many of his crew. Colonel Sam Parker had taken command while Jake recovered, and the Marine was making decisions that would have seemed crazy just days ago. "We're abandoning the surface," Sam announced to the combined human and Zilani forces. "Every civilian, every defender, everyone goes underwater. We fight them in the oceans where we have the advantage." Some of the Zilani commanders protested. Their surface cities had stood for thousands of years, but Reef Singer understood what Sam was thinking. "The humans are right," the alien said, his skin flashing with urgent patterns. "In the deep water, the Devourers cannot use their largest bioships. We force them to come to us on our terms." Dr. Maya Patel worked frantically in her laboratory beneath the waves. She had been studying Devourer tissue samples for days, trying to understand how their hive mind worked. What she discovered gave her an idea that was either brilliant or insane. "They're all connected through bioelectric signals," Maya explained to Jake as he limped into her lab. "But that connection is also their weakness. If we can disrupt it, they'll lose their coordination." Maya had been working with the Heart of Tides, the massive biocomputer that stored all Zilani knowledge. Together, they had created something that had never existed before, a virus designed to attack a living network. "It's not a biological virus," Maya said. "It's more like a computer virus, but one that attacks living tissue. If we can get it into their network, it should spread through their entire fleet." The problem was delivery. The virus had to be introduced directly into the Devourer network, which meant someone had to get close enough to one of their bioships to inject it. Reef Singer volunteered without hesitation. "I will carry your weapon into the heart of their fleet. It is fitting that one of the last Zilani should strike the final blow." The underwater cities became a fortress as humans and Zilani worked together in ways neither species had imagined. Human Marines taught Zilani defenders how to fight with kinetic weapons, while Zilani bioengineers helped humans adapt their equipment for underwater combat. Amy Rodriguez welded human technology to Zilani bioships, creating hybrid vessels that could survive in the crushing depths while carrying the firepower needed to fight the Devourers. The result was ugly but effective. Living ships armed with human weapons. When the Devourers realized their enemies had retreated underwater, they adapted quickly. Smaller bioships dove into the oceans, changing their forms to become aquatic predators. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had entered humanity's element. Humans had evolved from creatures that crawled out of the sea. Deep in their genes was the memory of fighting in dark waters against things with teeth. And while the Zilani were peaceful, they had lived in the oceans for millions of years. Together, the two species turned sanctuary seas into a trap. The battle began when the first Devourer bioships reached the underwater cities. They expected to find helpless civilians, but instead they found warriors waiting in the darkness. Sam Parker led the charge from a modified Zilani bioship that carried a full squad of Marines. The ship's living hull provided protection, while human weapons delivered devastating firepower. When Devourer organisms tried to board them, they found that humans were very good at fighting in close quarters. "Remember?" Sam called over the radio. "They may be tough, but they've never fought anything like us. We're from a world that tried to kill us every single day. Show them what Deathworlders can do." The Marines fought with a savage efficiency that shocked even their Zilani allies. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they switched to knives. When their knives broke, they used their fists. When the Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics, the humans simply changed their tactics faster. But the real battle was being fought at the deepest part of the ocean, where the Heart of Tides pulsed with the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization. Reefsinger swam through the dark water toward the largest devourer bioship, carrying Maya's virus in a container grown from his own body. Behind him, the lights of the dying cities cast strange shadows through the water. The bioship sensed his approach and sent organisms to intercept him, but Reefsinger had lived in these waters his entire life. He moved through them like a living torpedo, dodging attacks with grace that no human could match. When he reached the bioship's hull, Reefsinger found what he was looking for, a neural interface, one of the organic ports the devourers used to connect with their network. Without hesitation, he merged with it, allowing the virus to flow from his body into the ship's living systems. The effect was immediate. The bioship's movements became erratic as the virus spread through its neural pathways. But Reefsinger had sacrificed more than just the virus. To ensure it reached the main network, he had merged his own consciousness with it. "Tell my people," Reefsinger's voice came weakly over the radio, "that the song of deep currents will never end." Then his life signs went dark, but his sacrifice was not in vain. The virus spread through the devourer network like wildfire, jumping from ship to ship through their bioelectric connections. For the first time in their existence, the hive mind was fragmenting. Jake, back on his feet despite his injuries, watched from the Valiant's bridge as the enemy fleet began to fall apart. Bioships that had moved with perfect coordination now collided with each other, their crews confused and disoriented. "All ships attack now," Jake ordered, "while they're vulnerable." The combined human and Zilani fleet struck with everything they had. Kinetic weapons tore through bioship hulls that could no longer adapt quickly enough. Zilani bioships used their living systems to board enemy vessels and spread the virus further. The largest bioships, unable to coordinate their defense, began to cannibalize each other in their confusion. The sight was horrifying but satisfying as the creatures that had consumed entire worlds turned their hunger on themselves. Within hours, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat. Those bioships that could still function fled into deep space, their hive mind shattered and their coordination destroyed. In the aftermath, Jake stood on the deck of a Zilani bioship, looking out over the wounded but still living cities of Sanctuary. The battle was won, but the cost had been terrible. Millions of Zilani were dead, and their beautiful civilization would take generations to rebuild. But they would rebuild. Humans and Zilani worked together to repair the damage, sharing technology and knowledge in ways that benefited both species. The Zilani's bioengineering helped humans develop new medicines and technologies, while human weapons and tactics gave the Zilani the tools to defend themselves. Dr. Brooks made the final log entry as the Valiant prepared to return to Earth with news of humanity's first interstellar victory. "We came here to answer a distress call," she said into the recorder. "We found allies, enemies, and a war that will change both our species forever. The Zilani asked for help, and we gave it. Now we know we're not alone in the universe, and neither are they." But even as the ship turned toward home, long-range sensors detected new signals from distant star systems. More distress calls, more civilizations crying out for help against enemies they couldn't fight alone. Jake studied the signals with tired eyes. They would need new ships, more marines, better weapons. The war against the Devourers was far from over, but for the first time since leaving Earth, he smiled. Humanity had proven they could fight alongside aliens, could win battles against impossible odds, could answer the call when help was needed. The SOS had been clear. Help us. Earth had sent its Deathworlders, and they would keep sending them to every corner of the galaxy where the innocent needed protection and the darkness needed to be pushed back. The age of human galactic expansion had begun, not through conquest, but through alliance. And across the stars, other species would learn what the Devourers had learned too late. Sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who fought not for hunger, but for hope.